Good morning, coronavirus sexes. Well. Miss I lead with my VJ Birx was back with Justice with Janine. And of course, Janine did not do what she should do as a journalist, because she's not a journalist. She's an opinion piece author. That's right. You know, you'd think that being a alleged justice, that she would expect some actual evidence and that she would press the good doctor on her opinions regarding what's really going on with regards to actual coronavirus fatality rates. And, not let her play this mealy mouth. Well, we're learning more every day about how this virus interacts with our human hosts. Yes, we are. We are learning that this virus interacts with our human hosts in such a way that the actual fatality rate, when adjusted for the number of people who get it and don't have any symptoms, is approximately equal to that of a nasty flu. Very nasty. Like, 1968, 1969 style flu, which, by the way, was a flu, and which, as I've pointed out in this podcast before, I believe I might have actually had as a kid. Have a vague memory of being quite sick and in the pediatrician's office. But it would have been about that time. But whether or not that was actually what it was, I don't know. But it wouldn't shock me if that's what it was. So, and I wasn't ill very often as a child, but, come on, every kid gets sick. So, would that shock me? No, it wouldn't shock me at all. In fact, I suspect that that's exactly what it was. But again, we're talking about a pathology here that really isn't a whole lot worse than that. Now, what we were originally led to believe was that this was a bug that had a 5% fatality rate, or a 3% fatality rate, or 2% fatality. And by the way, those are fairly high, all right? SARS, to put some perspective on this, is about 15%. Which is really ugly, and about 50% over the age of 65, which, that's now we're talking about, playing Russian roulette with 3 rounds in a 6-shooter. That's getting up there in the, I don't like that kind of range, right? 15% is, is one round in a 6-shooter. That's bad enough. So, we ought to have some perspective here, though, that's appropriate when it comes to various bugs. And the idea that there's going to be a vaccine, we keep hearing vaccine. Folks, there's not going to be a vaccine, okay? We are also getting additional jackbooted actions. Look, Indiana, as I pointed out yesterday, Indiana is now saying no real reopening until July 4th. Oh, no, we'll let little things happen here and there, but we're not going to have actual places back at reasonable occupancy and things like that until the 4th of July. Think about that, folks. That's another 2 months. That's crazy. All right. And yet, I have my coffee and I can right now go get a beer. Oh my gosh, I can actually go get a beer. That's because I live somewhere where the crazy is only partly as stupid. Partly. And yet, there is stupid here. Don't get me wrong. There is stupid here. This, by the way, is nicer than the other place, which was more stupid. The other place being Florida, where DeSantis has decreed that 25% occupancy for restaurants. Folks, can we cut the cock and bull? There's not a single restaurant that will survive 3-4 months. Okay, remember, we're a month and a half into this now. All right, there's not a single restaurant that will survive at 25% occupancy for that length of time. Not one, or at 50% for that matter. You can't do it. Sit-down restaurants are some of the worst operating margin businesses you can go into. They are one of the toughest ways to actually try to run a small business. There's almost, good Lord. Interestingly enough, pizza is one of the better ones. If you're going to do food, pizza has some of the best gross operating margins. That's because pizza is very cheap to make. A lot of people don't realize this. You could actually make pizzas for a couple of dollars maximum, and so you can sell them for $10. Well, that's not too bad, right? But the overhead in full service restaurants and limited service restaurants, even in a limited service restaurant, if you have a dining room, is quite substantial. Now, if you're just doing takeout, you just have a window, whatever, then it's less, because you don't have the staffing requirements to do that. But even there, it doesn't always make sense. So, will the McDonald's survive? Yeah, probably. All right. Then you got another problem, which is that we've got all the screamers are going on about the coronavirus problems and things within the food production system. Nobody is paying any decent amount of attention to this. I'm getting some emails from people talking about this being you ought to have a chest freezer and stuff it full of meat because you're going to need it over the next 6 months. Well, there's a few problems with this, as you may or may not be aware. One of them is that packaged meat will keep for a decent amount of time when frozen, but not indefinitely. Okay, it eventually starts to have serious problems. You can vac pack it, and that'll help some too. But again, that's not perfect either. Second is that there is an awful lot of meat right now in storage. All right, so the way the food supply works in the United States is misunderstood by an awful lot of people. The challenge is not so much that there's going to be a problem today or tomorrow, because there's not. The challenge is that down the road, there's going to be serious problems because it takes time for that supply chain to refill. On the other hand, at the rate we're going, we're not going to have restaurants and bars and things like this open for an unbelievably long period of time. And by the way, that goes back to another thing too, which is anybody that thinks that we're going to just have this roaring economy come back and everything's going to be all peaches and clean and, it's all going to be wonderful. Folks, you got rocks in your head. Okay, you're stoned. You must be stoned. There isn't going to be any great booming recovery in the economy. It's not going to happen. And anyone who thinks it will, you're wrong. You're just flat out wrong. And I understand that people want to put a happy face on things, but listen, ladies and gentlemen, this is not how it's going to be, okay? We have in this country right now, with the shutdown that we're taking, we're probably going to see a 30 to 40% GDP decline in the second quarter. And remember, the second quarter runs through June. So you've got people talking about us not actually having things unlock in a meaningful way until the end of June. So you can essentially take the entire GDP of the United States, flush it down the toilet for the second quarter. We just had another state extend all the way through, into the July 4th area, Oregon, okay, which thinks, oh boy, man, we're going to, and listen, remember the original lie. Okay, remember what the lie was. The lie was that we were doing this to flatten the curve so hospitals wouldn't get overloaded. Well, with the exception of New York, the hospitals didn't get overloaded. And did we have a model that we could have used to alleviate that problem that didn't involve shutting the economy down? Yes. We had a sanitarium model. We could have done that. We know how to do that. We can stand up field hospitals. We've already proved this, right? And that's where all the COVID patients could have gone, and then there wouldn't have been a need for any kind of a shutdown. And remember, the point here, folks, is that flattening the curve does not change the area under it. Never has, never will, can't. So if you stretch it out, you've destroyed the economy, and the people who are going to get flattened by this thing and die get flattened by it and die anyway. So what are we doing? Where's the benefit? And then you got Birx running on, oh, remember to cover your face. You must wear a face mask. All right, let's talk about a couple of things with regards to these things. First off, you are insane if you think that this is actually going to stop the transmission, because it's not. This, as has been noted, is a fairly mobile, easily transmissible respiratory virus. It also happens to be shed in feces, which the CDC still won't talk about, is still a major problem, and is probably how the spread's happening in high-risk places like nursing homes. Birx keeps talking about, well, there's an awful lot of younger people that have serious comorbidities, including diabetes. Really, Dr. Birx? And how do you get type 2 diabetes as a young person? Well, you stuff your pie hole. Now, are there people who have type 1, which is an autoimmune disorder? Yeah, there are, but not very many. Type 1 is not all that common. Type 2 is another thing entirely, and it is almost entirely, not in every case, but in most cases, a self-inflicted disease. Okay? In other words, you begged for it. Now, let me ask a question. Am I responsible for the frailty of your health if you choose to smoke for 30 years? I don't think so. Should I have to wear a mask because you chose to smoke for 30 years and therefore are more susceptible to some bug? I don't think so. Why is it different if what you consumed went down your pie hole in the form of food instead of in the form of sucking on cigarettes? Can we have that conversation? Why doesn't anybody want to have that conversation? Oh, because now the whole social justice warrior and the lead with the VJ game disappears, doesn't it? Look, ladies and germs, in addition to everything else, the CDC's own data appears to document fairly well that we have people within state governments that are coding all deaths as COVID when they really aren't. They're doing it because Medicare, in particular, is paying a lot more money if you code something as COVID and if you intubate. We know that intubation in the case of COVID kills people. And it is not a useful therapy. Birx is out there. Oh, you sure heard that this thing with Janine. Oh, well, 80% of people get intubated when they're young. They're okay. You know what? We have a protocol that's out there that I documented the other day. It's been out for about 2 weeks now. Birx can't possibly not know about it. And it points out what I pointed out when the whole thing in Wuhan started, which is that intubation does not work. You need to understand something about intubation. Your body normally runs inspiration, that is inhaling air, on a negative pressure basis. You suck in air, and then you push it back out with your diaphragm. When you are on mechanical ventilation, it is working exactly the opposite way. The problem with doing this is that it causes barotrauma. Barotrauma is something I'm a little familiar with because I used to do a lot of diving. Barotrauma is very dangerous. It's also something that is completely painless. You don't feel it. And the reason you don't feel it is because there are no pain receptors in the lungs. So if you cause barotrauma to a patient, you cannot feel it. The patient doesn't feel the pain. And yet, by virtue of what a ventilator is and does, that risk always exists. And in this particular case, what we're seeing is that this is just the wrong treatment modality. You're going down the wrong road, and you're having bad results as a result of that. We talk about masks, and there are people talking about OSHA limits and oxygen exposure, things like that. Folks, there's a lot of tinfoil BS running around when it comes to masks, okay? First off, the primary issue with masks is work of breathing, which for a healthy person, under ordinary conditions at sea level, is not going to be much of a factor. The second is potential CO2 buildup because of the dead air space. The dead space is the area within your breathing, the entire closed area of your breathing apparatus that does not exchange gas. So you have dead space in your trachea, all right, which does not have any cells that exchange gas, and in your mouth, in the structures of your mouth. Because actual gas exchange happens in the lungs, in the air sacs. And so that volume that gets moved is dead space, and yet it contains gas. And so when you inspire air, you have to consume that space that has CO2 from the last expiration, but it doesn't have any usable oxygen, or at least very little. Fortunately, gas laws tell you about diffusion, and this happens extremely quickly. So that dead space is not really all that material under normal conditions. Now, if you're a diver, it becomes a bigger problem, especially if you're using a rebreather, which I built, designed my own, built it, and dove it. I know more in a little bit about this because I didn't kill myself doing so. But the issue about masks is mostly that they do increase dead space, which is a problem. Now, is it going to get you at sea level as a healthy person under normal conditions? No, it won't. What it will do is become quite uncomfortable due to the heat, the humidity, and everything else, especially as temperatures start to go up. And the other thing about them is that if you wear glasses, they become a very serious pain in the butt immediately because they get fogged up. Now, I wear prescription lenses most of the time. I don't need them to drive, but I do wear them because they help my vision. Okay, and that's fine. The problem that you have with prescription lenses, and that potentially becomes an issue with safety glasses, which if I'm using them for sanding or other, if I'm using a mask, an N95 for things like that because I don't want to inhale wood dust or whatever have you, there is a much bigger problem, which is that it fogs up your lenses. And that's because it concentrates the humidity, the humid air that would otherwise be blown out of your mouth or your nose, concentrates it in that space, and it fogs up the lenses. That creates a second set of problems. Secondly, the other thing is that a mask, its primary value, as I've pointed out before, is it keeps you from touching your nose and your mouth. It doesn't do anything for your eyes. And to the extent that it causes humidity and other things to get into the eyes, it may actually promote touching your eyes, and that is a primary route for entry of viruses. That's bad. So, are they valuable in some sense? Yeah. But are they a panacea? No. Is this something that's going, does this get into the OSHA immediately dangerous to life and health? No. IHLH. No, it's not. The people running that are just full of it. But the whole concept that we're somehow going to prevent the transmission this way is just a load of bull. Now, does washing your hands on a regular basis with real soap and water, not using sanitizer, does that help? Oh, yeah, that helps a lot because this virus is lipid enveloped. And so lipids, of course, are oils. Soap breaks down oils. All right. So the mechanical scrubbing of your hands, rubbing them together underneath the faucet, the soap, which breaks down the lipids, and then the flow of water that flushes away what was on your hands, that's extremely useful. Hand sanitizer, to the extent it kills the virus, is of some value. However, you don't get the mechanical action because there's nowhere for the stuff to go because there's no flow of fluid that's washing it away. So hand sanitizer, while better than nothing, is just that, better than nothing, which isn't saying much. The real answer is wash your blankety-blanking hands on a regular basis. But that benefit is to you. It's not to other people. Should you, if you are immune compromised, effort to stay indoors and whatever? Well, maybe you have to judge the value of this over, what you're willing to do and what you're willing to put out there and tolerate. Because at some point you're going to have to come out of your house. All right. And by the way, if this thing was so easily transmitted, every one of us, when we went to the grocery store, we'd all get it. Okay. But the fact is, it is circulating very easily. It's been circulating throughout the lockdowns, and it's going to continue to circulate until we reach a point that immunity starts to suppress. And guess what? We're seeing that in places like New York. So the idea that we have somehow avoided getting this bug, well, the serological surveys say, no, you haven't. And furthermore, for most people, and even a substantial percentage of those at very high risk, they get asymptomatic cases. It doesn't do anything to them. We need to reopen the economy. We need to stop with the BS. Those governors who are going to continue to play this game, they need to be removed from office by whatever means are necessary. And the reality is that all of this screaming about being able to avoid this, we are now finding, and this is now documented fact, folks, it's not working. It can't work. It isn't going to work. And it hasn't worked. Even when you've locked people down. It just doesn't stop the bug from spreading. But where are we going with this? Well, we have people like Cuomo who have actually ordered sick people put back into nursing homes, which is like setting fires. Okay? That's arson when you get down to it. Those kinds of acts need to be criminally punished. Furthermore, we have a protocol that a set of doctors, real doctors, are using and have come up with. We have a nursing home in Texas that it has come up with a protocol as well for early treatment. It seems to be working for them. They only lost one patient. Now, folks, you've got a nursing home full of people. A whole ton of them got it, including their residents. Most of those people are severely compromised in one way or another, and only one of them died. Well, I'm willing to bet that that's fewer people than died from the flu this year in that nursing home, which means that they've got a way to manage this. So this is no longer Sasquatch stepping on churches. So the question is, why are we treating it that way? That's what we need to be asking people at this point, and we need to force them to justify their positions. Because if not, this has now become a political game. How do we continue to screw the economy? But think about that, folks. You screw the economy, what happens? Then your tax base collapses, and then what are you going to pay for public health with? None of these people are thinking about this. None of the screaming Karens are thinking about this, but you better start, because that is a real issue, and it's going to show up very soon. Have a good day.